In today's video, I'm going to show you every single piece of gear that I have in my home studio. I'm going to be going over my analog synths, acoustic instruments, audio interfaces, tape machine, guitar pedals, all that good stuff. Unlike other studio tours, I want to actually give you guys demos of how I use this stuff and what it actually sounds like. I'm even going to show you the exact instruments that I used on songs with people like DaBaby, Future, and SZA. If you stay tuned to the very end, I'll show you the final reveal of what everything looks like together, and I'll even show you the exact cost to buy every single piece of gear in the studio. So stay tuned for that. Anyways, let's dive into my favorite part of my studio, my analog synths. First up on the list, we've got my Prophet Rev 2, and this was the first analog synth that I ever bought. I bought this around 2 or 3 years ago, and I really liked it when I first got it, but I found myself kind of getting sick of the sounds on it recently just because I had used it so much, and up until maybe a month or two ago, I wasn't really big on tweaking knobs and sound design and all that stuff. So I'm going to try to get back into it again and see if I can get some more mileage out of it. But this was definitely a great first synth. It's super versatile. You can do leads, basses, chords, plucks, pretty much anything. I remember like the first day that I got it, I was like, damn, this is why everyone like hypes up analog synths so much. Anyways, this synth cost $1,999. So it's definitely got a solid price tag on it, but I definitely made my money back on that by, you know, putting sounds that I made with it in kits. And I also got a placement with DaBaby called Risha Roulette, where I made almost the entire melody using just the Rev 2.
Turn the volume up, my headphone.
And this is what the original sample for that song sounds like. All right, moving on to the next synth in my studio, we have the Moog Matriarch. Now, this thing is awesome if you want to do either like some crazy Mike Dean, Travis Scott synth lead outro kind of stuff, or if you want to do some crazy synth arps like the one on Field Trip by Kanye. Overall, this synth is just very good for like top line melodies and like really weird, unique lead kind of sounds. And honestly, I went the longest time without really using this thing after I first bought it because it's kind of hard to use, especially if you're not into tweaking the knobs, because this synth actually has no presets. So if you want presets, you have to look up images of the settings and copy what the images are tweaking the knobs to do. Like if you look right here, these are the presets that come with the Matriarch. You get a book showing you where to actually put the cables and which knobs to tweak and all that stuff to make the factory presets. So as soon as you tweak those knobs, the sound changes and you can never get it to be the exact same again, which for some people, that's like a complete, like, you know, waste of time. You have to like make the preset every time. But I think that you end up coming up with cooler stuff because it's forcing you, one, learn a little bit of sound design, but then also you're never really reusing the same sound once. Every time you use it, it's slightly different. But anyways, enough yapping about it. This synth ran me $1,979. And I can say without a doubt, this is one of the best synths that I've purchased. But anyways, this is what it sounds like. All right, next up, we've got my Mellotron M4000D, and this thing is amazing for those vintage, like orchestral kind of sounds. If you guys have the Arturia V collection, you've probably used some sounds from the Mellotron V that's inside of it, or if you just have Analog Lab. And essentially, I just loved those presets so much that were inside of the VST that I decided to get the real version. And I use this all the time for either dark trap samples, where I want to like have like some live bells or some like dark Mellotron style strings. And I also use it all the time in my soul samples whenever I want to have like that vintage 60s kind of sound, because there was a lot of records back in those old soul sample days that used the Mellotron for strings, brass, bells, and stuff like that. And this synth ran me $1,999 again, and I would feel comfortable recommending this to you if you really like vintage stuff and you want like strings, brass, and bells, like maybe even flute. If you really like those kind of sounds and you use the Mellotron VST and you abuse it, you love it so much, I would feel comfortable saying it's fire. But this keyboard gets some hate from some people that I know who bought it. A lot of people buy it and then sell it, and I feel like it's a little hard to use and get it to sound like perfect right out of the box. But if you know how to process it a little bit, I think it's definitely a good pickup. Anyways, here's some sounds that I made using the Mellotron. All right, next up on the list, we've got my Behringer Poly D. This synth is the cheapest out of the bunch, and it was only $500 on sale on Amazon. I got it on Black Friday discount, so I think it's normally like $550 or something like that. But this thing is a beast for that price. I would honestly say I would get rid of both the Mellotron and the Prophet Rev 2 just to keep that synth because it sounds super good for leads and basses. Essentially, if you don't know what the Behringer Poly D is, it's kind of a one-for-one ripoff of the Mini Moog by Moog. And don't get me wrong, I love my Moog Matriarch, but the Mini Moog is like almost $5,000, and I was just not trying to spend that much money for some bass sounds and lead sounds, especially when I've already got a bunch of great lead sounds on the Moog Matriarch back there. So I did some research and I found out that the Behringer Poly D is pretty much just a one-for-one remake of the Mini Moog with some added features like it has a chorus, it has distortion, and you can even play chords with it. But anyways, let's take a listen to what this sounds like. All right, last but not least, definitely my favorite synthesizer that I've ever purchased and the most expensive, we've got the Prophet 10. Now, the Prophet 10 is like a lot of people's dream synths, and this thing is absolutely amazing for pads, synth keys, leads, basses. I mean, it's very versatile, and it just has that old vintage analog tone to it. And that's exactly what I like for the style of music that I make. And just overall, even if it isn't just about this vintage and nostalgic kind of sound, it just has the best sounds on it. I barely have to tweak the knobs at all on it. It has a bunch of presets and they all sound great. And I ended up actually picking this up used for $3,800, but I believe it retails for somewhere around $4,500 or something like that. And I've been making so many new sounds and loops for my new kit Melody Mastery using this. So real quick, let's listen to some of those phrases and starters that I've made using the Prophet. As you can tell, the Prophet sounds amazing. If you guys liked any of those phrases, starters, all of them are in my new kit Melody Mastery that is coming out soon. I cannot wait for you guys to test it out. But if you want some free sounds specifically from the Prophet 10, I dropped a little leak of some Melody Mastery sounds that is completely for free. You can just download that in the first link in the description. You just got to put your email in and we'll email you the link. Definitely some crazy sounding stuff in there. And there's so much more crazy stuff inside Melody Mastery, but that'll be coming out in a couple weeks. Anyways, let's get into the next part of the video, my live instruments. So my first live instrument is my nylon acoustic guitar, and my model is called, I'm gonna butcher this pronunciation, but my model is the Ibanez GA35 thin line acoustic electric classical guitar. If you guys don't know the difference between a steel string and a nylon string acoustic guitar, essentially nylon string has that like Spanish guitar, gentle, classical acoustic kind of sound, and a steel string guitar has a more like gritty, bright kind of sound to it, and it sounds more like pop country kind of music. So chances are, if you have trap loops that you love the guitar on, it's probably a nylon guitar. And this guitar ran me $299.99. And here's some examples of what it sounds like. All right, for my next live instrument, I've got my electric guitar, and I have the ESP LTD EC257. Quite a name. I can't remember why I got this guitar. I've been told by people that this is like a heavy metal guitar. I think I got a recommendation from someone, and I just liked the way that it looked. But I actually got both of my Grammy nominations with this guitar. I played it on my song with Future and SZA called Beautiful.
Make her feel like a superstar. She way above average. I just do spaghetti her cause I'm a barbarian.
And this guitar ran me $599. And real quick, here's some other examples of what this guitar sounds like, just isolated so you can hear it a little bit better. Next up, we've got my steel string acoustic guitar, and I cannot for the life of me find out which model that I bought. I've had this for years, but I do know that it's from Fender and it's somewhat of a more entry-level guitar. And I'll be real, I really don't use this one that much. I use it when I want like a super bright guitar kind of sound, but if I ever work on some pop stuff, that's when I'll grab that. And like I said, I don't know exactly how much this one cost me, so I'm just gonna approximate and say that it was about $200. And real quick, here's a loop that I made recording that guitar. My next live instrument is my electric bass, and I actually played this on the same record, Beautiful by Future and SZA. The bass line for the whole song was all recorded on that bass, and that bass is only $90. I am really terrible at playing the bass. I'm only good enough to, play like a few like short riffs at a time and then stitch them together. I can't play like crazy bass lines. So I knew that it would be a complete waste of money for me to buy a super expensive bass guitar. So there's a little fun fact. Grammy nominated record recorded on an $89 bass. Next up on my list, we've got the ukulele, and this is a ukulele by some brand called Kala, I guess. I think this is one of the cheaper ukuleles that you can get. I think it was like $60. I don't even know if I bought it or if it was a gift for me. And I actually do use it occasionally whenever I want like ethnic pluck kind of sounds for my dark trap loops. And this is what it sounds like. Next up, I've got this weird, unique guitar that my mom got me as a gift. So I have no idea how much money it is, but it's essentially a guitar made out of an old cigarette box. And I definitely don't use this thing all the time, but it has a weird, like kind of unique tone to it. You could almost use it for like some old, like Western sounding stuff. Here's a little demo of what that sounds like. Next up, we've got the saz, which is a Turkish instrument, I believe. Super like Balkan, Eastern European, Middle Eastern kind of sounding instrument. And this thing is way harder to play than I thought it was going to be. This thing ran me about $200, and it definitely, it looks cool in the studio. It's super unique looking, and it does have a unique sound, and there might be like specific samples where it comes in handy. But here's a couple phrases and ideas I made using that. Next up, I've got a bunch of random percussion and just like random little one-off instruments that I've collected over the years. Like I got these shakers and this tambourine just on the streets in Puerto Rico, just on some random shop for a few bucks. Other ones just random instruments on Amazon that I asked for Christmas. And I have no idea how much all this stuff is just like all in, but I would say it's about $50 or something like that. And I'm not going to sound demo every single one of these instruments, but I essentially just use these as like little accents and textures, especially in my soul loops. That's really the only time that I use these. And then next up, we've got a cool little instrument called the lyre harp, which is essentially a harp, but it's super, super small. And this is another one of those instruments that I kind of bought. I wanted to experiment and just like get some new sounding instruments to sound design and make more interesting sounds for kids for you guys. Whenever I first got it and I was kind of getting into using it, I used it to make a bunch of starters. And it definitely has like a cool ethnic harpy kind of sound. It doesn't sound like as clean and perfect as a normal harp, probably because it's super cheap. It was only $99. Here's some demos of what that sounds like. Next up, we've got my glockenspiel, which I actually use this a lot, even though this is one of the kind of like the doinky, like random instruments in my studio. I use this all the time in my soul samples. Like I would say like maybe half of the soul samples that I create, I put in some kind of little accent counter melody using the glockenspiel because it sounds way more authentic than VSTs. And I've also found that it sounds really good if I add a bunch of effects to it, if I use it for some trap stuff, like making some crazy bell starters, bell phrases with that. And I can't find the exact model, but I know that it's just some random one off of Amazon. I think it was around $90 if I had to guess. But anyways, here's an example of what that sounds like. And then last, but definitely not least, probably my favorite live instrument that I have in my studio, we have my Baldwin upright piano. And maybe leave a comment right now guessing how much you think this real acoustic piano is before I tell you. But this piano is way better than using VSTs whenever I'm going for that like authentic vintage kind of sound on my samples, or whenever I'm making soul samples or even R&B samples where I want the piano to have more texture. I use this all the time. One thing I will say about having a real piano is it is way easier to play than a MIDI. And a lot of people are surprised to know that this piano only cost me like $500-600. It actually cost me more money to have them move it into my house than it did to buy the actual piano. I believe this piano is from 1987, so it's definitely got some years on it. But essentially, I found a guy nearby me that refurbishes pianos to make them sound brand new. But anyways, here's a demo of what that sounds like. All right, and that's pretty much it for the live instruments in my studio. So the next part I want to get into is my camera equipment. I have a lot of people ask me what camera I use, what lens I use, all the stuff that I use to actually make these YouTube videos. So I figured this would be a perfect time to do it. All right, so for my camera that you guys see all my videos with, I use the Canon EOS M50 Mark II. And this is a super common camera that a lot of content creators that I know use. The only reason I bought this is my boy Dilly had this camera and we went to LA together and we did a vlog and I saw the footage on his camera and I thought it looked way better than whatever I was using in the past. And I've been loving it ever since. I have no plans on upgrading my camera. I feel like the videos look fine. But a big factor to the way that the videos look is not just the camera, it's also the lens. And the lens I use is a 16mm lens by Sigma. Shout out my boy Tri-Freeze for putting me onto this because I also know nothing about lenses. So I, again, just kind of bought off of his recommendation. So, I mean, you can see the footage right now. If you like the way it looks, then it's definitely worth looking into. Next up, I got my tripod, which is, I have no idea. This might be like 25 or 50 bucks. This is honestly just some random one on Amazon that I got. There's no like specific reason I got this. All right, next up on the list, I've got my ring light, and this ring light is by Neewer. And honestly, it's just some random light that I found on Amazon. I think it's about 120 bucks. I couldn't find the exact model. And as you can see, if I have it all the way up, it is very, very bright. So you could definitely have a lot of flexibility with the lighting and stuff with this one. And then the other thing that I have for lighting for my videos are these little backlights that I have this blue filter on so that it projects this kind of like blue background in the background of my videos. It's kind of a subtle touch. It really doesn't like completely change the lighting in my room. And don't worry, I'm going to get into some more cool stuff with sound previews in a second with my guitar pedals and my tape machine. But first, I wanted to go over some more gear in the studio that just actually makes the studio run and work. So the first thing is the heart of the studio, and 100% the most important part of my studio, and is my laptop. So my laptop is a MacBook. It has the M1 chip in it. I think it's a 16-inch MacBook, and it's really important to me that my computer can run very smoothly and there's no problems whenever I load up 50 different VSTs in a project file, especially as a sample maker. And this computer has been a life changer because a few years back I had bought this MacBook, which is an older version. It's before they had the M1 chips in them. I'm not gonna lie, I spent a lot of money on this computer, somewhere in the neighborhood of $6,000 to $7,000 on it, and I maxed it out with like all the craziest specs, got it custom ordered and everything. My understanding, I'm definitely not a tech guy by any means, but my understanding is the computer inside of it had such strong and like powerful specs, and the fan to stop the computer from overheating was so bad. It's pretty much an engine that's too powerful for the shell that it's in. I mean, it would crash all the time and it ran terribly, and for spending that much money, I was super pissed with how poor the performance was. And I did some research and I ended up going with the certified refurbished one on Apple, and it was definitely one of the best decisions I made. This computer is amazing. And for anyone who's curious, my specs are, it's a 16-inch from 2021 Apple M1 Max chip, 64 gigabytes of memory, and then it's got 4 terabytes of storage on the actual computer. And I went back and looked at my order from Apple. This computer ran me $3,659. So definitely one of the pricier items in my studio, but it is the most important part of the studio, so it makes sense to invest a lot of money on that. Next up, we've got my studio desk. And if any of you guys have seen I think it's called the Platform by Output. Output has a desk, a studio desk that looks super fire. I essentially wanted that, but they were like $1,000, and I was like, am I really gonna drop $1,000 on a table? So I found one that was a little bit cheaper, which is called the Glorious Sound Desk Pro, and I got that for $599 after going back back and looking at the order email. And I mean, there's nothing crazy to say about this desk. It's nice, it works. So moving on. All right, next up, I have my MIDI controller, and this is the S61 Complete Control controller by Native Instruments. And I really like this controller. I had a 49 key MIDI in the past, but I found that it just felt super cheap. And these ones, I believe, are semi-weighted keys, so they're not fully weighted, but they have a much better feeling than the old MIDI that I had. And it has 61 keys, so I'm able to play across multiple octaves. But it came at a big price of $799 for this MIDI keyboard, which is crazy for a MIDI keyboard, but I wouldn't take that back at all. I really love the way that it plays, and it is 10 times better than anything that I've used in the past. And to go along with my MIDI, as well as all of my analog synths, I also got sustain pedals, and I would guess that these cost me anywhere from $50 to $70. So we're just gonna say $60. And essentially, I've got a sustain pedal right under my MIDI. I've also got a sustain pedal under both of my synth racks. And then lastly, on the subject of MIDI, I've got my mini MIDI keyboard, which is just one that I picked up at Guitar Center from Arturia, because I was about to go on a 2-week long trip, and there's no way I could go 2 weeks without working. So I wanted to have a MIDI keyboard that I could travel with, that I could bring places. So this is just a super small one, and I really like it because it just fits in my backpack. I definitely recommend getting one of those super small mini MIDI keyboards. And then next up, I've got an essential part to my studio that is always in it every single day. And that's my guy, Rudy. This guy is in here every single day, every video that I'm filming, laying on the ground, bumping into my synths with his toys and making a mess of this place. But I'm definitely a dog person, so it's all good. All right, next up, on a more serious note, I've got my Audio-Technica headphones, and I've had these headphones for years. They are busted as hell. I think I got these for like 40 bucks, but these are just super basic, typical headphones. And I don't even mix on these. I mix on headphones that I don't think a lot of people mix on. I think they're terrible for mixing, but that's what I use. I'll get into that in a second. But I use these whenever I'm recording instruments, right? So whenever I'm using my interface, these are just always plugged in, and I can go in, record vocals, record guitar, whatever I'm recording. And then the next pair of headphones I have are my Sony headphones, and these, I looked them up, I think they were $399. I can't remember the exact model of these, but I know that I got them when I went to one of the camps for Sony Publishing, and they were just giving out free headphones to all the publishing members. But yeah, super solid pair of headphones. And next up, we've got my favorite headphones, the only headphones that I mix on, which are absolutely horrific for mixing because they color the sound so much. We've got the Beats Studio 3 headphones, and these are Bluetooth headphones. And the reason I like them, one, because they're Bluetooth, so I don't have a cable that's like in my way, accidentally trip over it or anything like that. But two, because a lot of times that I'm working, I'm in the coffee shop, I'm traveling, and these have super great noise canceling. And I'm a big believer, like I know a lot of people with mixes that everyone asks them how they get it, and they're doing it on like AirPods. A lot of people overthink it, and they think that there's like some secret headphone that's gonna like fix their mix. As long as you have like a decent pair of headphones and you get used to how they sound, you'll know how to make stuff sound good using those headphones. So if you travel a lot or you work outside of the house a lot, I would definitely recommend these just for the noise canceling, but I know that they are not meant to be mixing headphones. And next up, I've got my Yamaha HS7s, and these are the only speakers that I use in my studio right now, and these sound great. I have no complaints, but honestly, I don't use my speakers at all. I feel like they're unnecessary for a lot of people. I never actually mix on them. I only ever mix stuff on here, so whenever I do use speakers, it's more just like for the vibe of like having the music play out loud. But anyways, with those speakers, I also have the speaker stands, and I didn't actually buy these. I got them as a gift, I believe. So I'm gonna approximate they're somewhere around $75, but I mean, there's nothing really to say. They hold the speakers. And then next up, following the speakers again, I just bought these. I haven't even had time to test them out. They just arrived yesterday, but I just bought 2 pairs of the KRK Go Aux speakers. And essentially, these are just super tiny studio monitors that can fit in your backpack. So I got these for when I'm traveling, so we can have speakers if I'm cooking up with people in hotel rooms or wherever it is. And I actually got it specifically for a producer camp that I'm running in LA, where I'm having a bunch of my subscribers fly out. We're going to be working in person with industry producers and all that stuff in a mansion in LA. And for the reviews that I've heard online, they sound good. But anyways, next up, we've got the Focusrite 2i2. And this is definitely one of the stereotypical bedroom producer audio interfaces. My only problem with it, and the reason that this interface sucked so bad for so long, is I use a lot of synths, live instruments, guitars, mics, recording stuff in my music. And since this thing only has 2 inputs and 2 outputs, every time I wanted to record something, I had to like go all around my studio, go underneath synths, unplug cables. So that was the big downside to using the Focusrite at first, but I just got something about a month ago that has been a complete game changer. Is the Samson S Patch Bay, and this thing is a godsend. It was way cheaper than buying an interface, and with that I get 48 points, so I can have 48 different cables plugged in at once. Let me grab the camera real quick and show you how it works. All right, so essentially this is the patch bay right here, and it really doesn't look like much, but what you can see in the back here is that all of these cables are plugged in at once. Every single one of my guitar pedals, my tape machine, all of my synths back there and over there are all running cables through the floor up into right here. So this is like acting almost as like an extension cord to my audio interface. And then if I wanted the output of a synth, so I want the sound from one of my synths, say I want this one right here, all I have to do is just plug one cable in right there into the first input right there on my interface. And then right away, I can just go play on that synth and then it's already recording. And to go even a step further, if I grab a longer cable really quick, let's say I wanted to use one of these synths, but I wanted to record it into my guitar pedals. I would just put the output of that into the inputs of the guitar pedals. So now the sound is going out of my synth into the patch bay, through here, into this wire, into the guitar pedals, and then I would just take the output of the guitar pedal, so the sound coming out of the guitar pedal, and then put that into my audio interface. And now I'm recording that synth into that guitar pedal without having to like move the guitar pedal around and all this stuff, and I can just work a lot faster and a lot more free. But anyways, next up, I've got my mic, which you can see right here, and I use this mic for all my videos for the actual, you know, talking head clip that you guys are hearing right now. And I also use it whenever I'm recording my own vocals. Sometimes I record guitar through here. Pretty sure it's the Shure MV7X microphone, and it's really meant for podcasting and like, you know, kind of talking like this in this video, because it's got super good noise reduction. And along with that, I also got this mic arm that I can kind of move around for my videos. But anyways, moving on, the other mics in my studio are the Shure SM57 mics, and I actually have two of these mics, and they're set up by my piano. And the reason that I have two of them is so I can capture both the front and the back of my piano's sound. And when you combine those two together, it gives the piano just a more full dynamic kind of sound. But anyways, I also got some mic stands for those, and those are just like super generic Guitar Center stands. So I would say like $30 to $50. Let's just call it $50 for those mic stands. And while we're on the topic of stands, I've got two synth stands. The first one ran me $234, and that's the one that has the 3 layers. And then the second synth stand, I believe, was only $50. I found like the cheapest one I could because I just did not feel like spending money on a stand for my keyboards. Next up, I have hella cables in my studio, instrument cables, XLR cables, power cables, headphone cables. There's just cables galore in here, and I am absolutely terrible at cable management. Believe it or not, it used to be much worse. I could barely walk in here. There were so many cables. But I would say like all my cables, all in all, and like cable management tools that I've bought to help with them, like somewhere in the neighborhood of $300. I also have stuff like cable sleeves on my walls that I attempted to do some cable management and make it look a little prettier. But one thing that I did do that helps a lot, I used to have all of these like patch cables that I use for my patch bay just kind of sitting on my desk. So I just went on Amazon and I ordered some hooks, and I just drilled in some holes on my desk and put them there, and then I just hang my cables on there. And for me personally, that's worked super well to have them still like in an arm's reach, but they're not just all over messing up my place. Next up, I've got my Grammy nominations. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't know this, but for plaques or your Grammy award certificates or any of that, you actually have to pay money for those. So that's why I don't have a ton of plaques and a ton of awards in my studio, because I can't justify paying the money for some wall art. And then going off of that with more of the decoration stuff in my studio, I've got this new accent wall behind me, and that cost $170. It's just wood paneling that we had glued and then screwed into the wall. I think it really spices up the place and just gives it some more dimension. It's not just all like bland white walls all around the whole entire studio. Next up, I have 2 chairs in my studio, and for both of the chairs together, I'm assuming it's like somewhere in the neighborhood of $200. And next up, I've got a little lamp. This is just some random lamp from Target or IKEA. And then recently, I just picked up this Govee light. It's just like a tower, like strip light, and I just put it in the corner of my studio, kind of by my guitars. It just adds like a nice little ambient like backsplash lighting. Next up, I've got my TV, which is not a very big TV. It's like 40 inches or something like that. But if I had to guess, it was probably around $200 or something like that. Recently, my girl just got me a PS5, so I've been playing that whenever I'm done with my work for the day, just for like 30 minutes or so before bed. And actually, the reason that she had got it for me for Christmas is not because I'm a huge gamer or anything, but one of the songs that I have with Moneyman and Key Glock called Demons in the Dark is actually in 2K25. I've been fucking around ever since Christmas and playing on that. Next up, I've got some boring stuff. I got storage bins, and this is where I keep like my little percussion instruments or just like manuals for my synths and stuff like that. I've also got a little side table that was probably around $50, and honestly, I just put it there because it kind of looked like an empty space. And then I've also got another thing for storage. It's this little like storage dresser thing. And then also on top of that, I've got my vinyl record player, which honestly is just for decoration. I don't really use it that much. I don't really like just sit here and listen to music because most of the time when I'm in the studio, I'm working. But one of the things that I've been doing recently and just like collecting is whenever I'm a part of an album, I'll buy the vinyl from that album. So like for my 21 Savage, Suicide Boys, Glorilla, and then my DJ Khaled album that I was a part of, I saw those vinyls in Target, so I just pick them up whenever I see them. And then next up, we've got some of my favorite things in the studio, my hardware effects. And starting off with my Akai GX 4000D tape recorder. So this is an actual tape machine from the 70s. And if you know me at all, if this is not your first time ever hearing about me, you know that a big part of my sound and my brand in general is making like these really authentic sounding 60s and 70s soul samples. And earlier in 2024, I was working on this kit called Vintage Essentials. So I went on Reverb, I did some research, and I got this tape recorder. And essentially what I do is after I'm done making the whole sample, I'll just send that whole audio file through my interface, through my patch bay, into the tape machine, and then record it into the tape machine, and then record that back into my computer through the interface and all that. And I'm essentially just using it as like a real life RC20. So I picked up this bad boy and it's been amazing. Next up, we got my guitar pedals, and I'll start with the cheapest. The cheapest one is by far this little Crybot one that I think is like $30 on Amazon. This is essentially just like a auto wah filter, so it gives that like wah wah funky guitar effect. So here's a little sound demo of that. And then although the majority of the reason I got that was for guitar, I've actually been experimenting with putting synths through that pedal, and it sounds crazy. It gives it like this really weird like wah-wah sound, but on a synth. Like, I don't know, it's pretty cool. Anyways, my next pedal is still pretty cheap. It is the June 60 Chorus by TC Electronics, and this thing is about $70, and it's just a great like analog sounding chorus. So I'll let you hear a little demo of that right now. Next up, I've got the flashback delay, and this pedal was $119, and this was actually one of the first guitar pedals that I got. I was a little bit too scared to like spend $500 on like a delay pedal because I had never used this, but recently I've been using it more and kind of learning how it works and liking it more. And here's a little demo of a before and after with this pedal. All right, next up, we got the Boss 202 Space Echo. This thing is amazing, especially if you like weird, detuned, vintage sounding delays, like distorted, just like delays with a lot of character. You'll just have to hear it. And then next up, we've got my favorite guitar pedal, hands down, the Chroma Console. This thing is a multi-effects pedal. It has delay, reverb, chorus, distortion, tape cassette emulation. You can take stuff and flip it subtly to just make like digital VST sounds sound like they're actually like coming from like a real synth. Or if you really want to get experimental, you can flip stuff on its head completely. So I like that there's just a lot of versatility. If I was to recommend only one pedal, I think this one is definitely the one. So here's a quick little sound demo of that. And then for my last guitar pedal, I've got the Strymon Iridium, which is pretty much just a guitar amp pedal. I record my guitar directly through there instead of directly into the interface. And I'll let you hear a before and after. It's super good for like subtle like R&B neo soul tones or crunchy, distorted rock tones, even like if you're into that. But yeah, here's a before and after. And then along with all those pedals, I recently just got this little like pedal board holder kind of thing that has a power unit on the back, so I don't have to go out and buy different like power cables that need outlets to plug into for every single one of those pedals. And then real quick, I wanted to show you an example of like combining the guitar pedals. So one thing that I love that the Patch Bay has given me the freedom to do is like run everything through multiple guitar pedals all at once. Like I can sit there and record a super boring, bland sound on my synths, but have it being routed through all my guitar pedals at once, and then just get super weird, trippy, like experimental sounds with them. Here's some examples of a before and after, just like running it through like multiple pedals at once. And that's pretty much it for the gear in here. So now I'm gonna go through and just walk through my entire studio and kind of show you how everything is laid out, how it all looks when you're in the room, not just looking piece by piece. And at the end of that, I'll show the final price of this entire setup. So I'll see y'all then. Anyways, thank you for making it to the end of this video. And before I reveal the price of everything all in, if you enjoyed it, just hit that subscribe button so I can keep making more videos like this for you guys. And anyways, approximating on certain things that are just so old that I forget how much money I spent on them. The all-in cost of my studio at this point is $26,218.98 about. And one thing I want to say is I'm not making this video to try to flex and brag about all this gear I have. One thing that you need to take into consideration is I've been doing this for around 8 years now. So I've just been collecting this gear one piece at a time. So what you're seeing is a culmination of a lot of years worth of work. And then also, I really want to stress that you don't need any of this stuff. You can do almost all this stuff in the box. And especially if you're a beginner, please don't waste all your money on super expensive hardware that you probably don't even need at this point. But I do think there is a certain point in your career where it makes you stand out. Like there is a difference in quality between the VST stuff and the analog stuff. Honestly, I wanted to put more placements in this video that I have made with all these sounds, but almost all of my placements are with stuff that I made in the box with VSTs, with sound kits and stuff like that. But it just shows you that you don't need all this stuff in order to make good music. And then lastly, before I go, just a reminder, if you want some free sounds using all this equipment while you're waiting, make sure to click the first link in the description down below. Got a free pack of sounds for you from my upcoming kit, Melody Mastery. Gonna be crazy, but that's all I got for you. Peace.